Hello. It's really an honor to be here. And I want to just say, I'm actually here to talk about the future. But in the 24 hours that I've been in your fabulous country, I've experienced the welcome to country comments a few times. And I'm actually an historian by training, and I think that is just a remarkable phenomenon. I hope that it never becomes glib. It's truly an amazing experience to be reminded in an easy way to think about the past, to think about where we've come, particularly when we're so excited about where we're going. So in the remarks I'm about to make, I really want to encourage you to carry your past with me into the future, because that's where we're going. We're going into a future that's already begun. You're very familiar with it. And it feels just familiar enough that we may be starting to take it for granted. So if I'm successful with these remarks, I'll make you a little bit uncomfortable, and I'll remind you to not take certain things for granted. So first of all, would everyone in the room take out your version of this device? And hold it up. I feel like, the Beatles. It's actually very cool. Hold it up, and now turn around and look at the room. Look at how many. Is there anyone who's not holding one up? All right. So come with me as we together invent what I call digital civil society. And it's a working title. I'm trying to understand something that's changing basically as I stand here. When I think of digital civil society, I use this definition to try to grab a couple of things. All of the ways we use our private resources, so that is the things that we control as private individuals, our time, our money, our wisdom, our knowledge, our information. We make our decisions about those things, and we put them to use in ways that benefit others. Sometimes that's giving money, sometimes it's donating time, oftentimes it's mobilizing our networks, and increasingly all of that is being done with digital tools. That, in fact, should be our starting assumption from here on out. That everything we do to use our private resources for public benefit, we are going to do digitally. We may also do them the good old-fashioned ways, but there will be a digital version of everything. There already is a digital version of every kind of transaction you can conduct, all the kinds you can organize, all the ways you can organize a community, all the ways you can do outreach, all the ways you can structure an organization. There is some digital version of that, and we need to reach a point where we just assume that. It's very easy if you're under 20 years old. It's always been there. I heard a quote once and it refers to technology, although the more you think about it, you might realize it refers to a lot of other things. If the technology exists when you're born, it's the natural way of doing things. If a technology is introduced when you're in your 20s, it's how you're going to make your career. And if a technology is introduced when you're over 40, you think it's a fad. We're in the age of digital assumption, and all of the ways we can use our private resources for public benefit, which includes philanthropy and nonprofits, but doesn't stop there. It includes social businesses and crowdfunding, social enterprise and impact investing. That's all a part of using our private resources for public benefit is now going to be able to be done digitally. That's where we're starting. So when I talk about digital data, I'm not talking about just the information Brad Smith just talked about. He's got a big part of it and a very important piece for improving the sector. But I'm talking about a broader range of data. I'm talking about all of those ones and zeros that are collected by us, from us, and around us. Some of them come from our mobile devices. Some of them come from sensors in the streets around us. Many of them come from the satellites that are circumnavigating the globe at all times. And that omnipresent digital data are being used in a variety of ways to make sense. And we need, as civil society, as philanthropists and nonprofits, to catch up with the realities of that digital agenda and the digital activism that's surrounding it, and catch up and use those tools in a way that aligns with our values and our missions and doesn't use us, but we use it. So when I started to really dig into this question of digital civil society and this kind of enormous variety of digital data, I had to take myself back to school, quite literally in my case, to understand, was there something fundamentally different about the digital environment in which we now live our lives from the old environment in which I'd been raised, the environment I knew so well, and the civil society I'd studied. So when I went to Stanford to do my doctoral work in 1990, I went there with the question, what's public, what's private, and who decides? And I was studying history. I befuddled the history department. They didn't know how to answer that question. I went to spend the next 25 years of my life working in philanthropy, where I could look at how private dollars were used in public systems. Well, here we are, 2014. It is 24 years later. I'm still asking the exact same question. I'm doing it at the exact same university, and I'm doing it with mechanical engineers, computer scientists, and global intellectual property lawyers. Now, some of you may not think that's a big step up. But it's extraordinary how the same question is now being asked in different disciplines. So yes, there is something quite different about the digital environment in which we now live and do our work. And it's not just that things move faster and go global more quickly. And it's not just that we can reach more people than we ever would have reached with a single appeal done by the telephone. There's a whole list of the characteristics of the actual ones and zeros that are very different from the things that we've built our economy and our civil society and our political systems about. Now, if we were at Stanford, I would go through these one by one and we'd have a quiz at the end, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it a little more simply. Take that phone back out. Take your phone back out, please. And hand it over to the person sitting next to you. Why is that so funny? All I hear is this roar. I really don't know why that's so funny. But stay that way. You should have your neighbor's phone, and he or she should have your phone. And here's the point. And there may be many other points you can tell me about when we do some questions. But in the analog age in which we've built our economy and our politics and certainly our civil society, when I take something and I give it to someone, as you've just done, I don't have it anymore. Right? I can't have it. But in the digital age, if I were to send my imaginary friend here the information on my phone so that she would have it, we would in fact both have it. That's what makes all of that different from what we're used to working in. You can take your phone back now. Don't leave with somebody else's phone. So what I want us to think about is that we are in a moment where, it's exciting to come here from the States, and I've just come from Beijing, where the world of philanthropy is an absolute rocket ship straight up, and there's an incredible opportunity to learn from the U.S. And this is an aside. Nobody ever invites me anywhere to tell you what I think is wrong with U.S. philanthropy. So if you'd like, I'll do that another time. But where we're going, the U.S. will not invent. You will invent it. We will collectively, as a globe, invent it. Because what we need to do as a global community is take our core values, the assumptions of civil society, the assumptions of doing something of our own volition to make something better for someone else, do it using digital data and infrastructure, and create something that actually carries forward our values and assumptions and that does not degrade them. So let me tell you a little bit more about what I mean. We're already about 15 years into this, by the way. there's a number of things around you that, just like the fact that everybody in the room had a phone, we've started to just sort of take for granted. I want to get you to stop and think about how significant they are. Here's some of what's been created brand new in just the last 15 years because of digital tools. I'll give you an example of each of these. So we now have a number of organizations around the world. This is just a small sample of 3. Creative Commons, the Wikimedia Foundation, and Mozilla, which makes the Firefox browser, that are not-for-profit organizations that only exist to manage digital assets. They couldn't have existed 15 years ago. Everything they manage is digital. They only exist because of the digital environment. There are more and more and more organizations coming along like that. And all of us, even if our organizations do things in addition to managing digital assets, can learn from those that are trying to adapt the nonprofit form to manage something that's only digital. The other thing that's being facilitated by digital data and digital infrastructure are new kinds of organizations. So not just organizations that only manage digital things, but organizations that are structured fundamentally different. So Code for Australia is an organization that partners with local governments, uses public data, and creates things that benefit the public entities, the city or state governments, as well as the citizens of that place. The exchange, the new kind of value relationship between the public sector and the nonprofit sector in the code movement is code, is data. That's the exchange. Crisis Commons is a global network of software hackers who get together whenever there's a natural disaster, anywhere in the world, and create lightweight apps to help facilitate the disaster response. If you look for them on a charity registry, or if you look for them in the Foundation Center's database of nonprofits, you won't find them. You won't find them in a business registry. You won't find them anywhere. There's no organization there. It's simply a global network of volunteers that's created apps that are now depended upon by the Australian government, the US government, departments of defense, the Red Cross, and humanitarian aid organizations around the globe. Europeana is one of about 80 different national, international, and regional associations that are working to digitize and connect and capture and preserve their cultural heritages. They're creating not only individual libraries of digital information, but a global connected system of cultural preservation and cultural heritage and literary heritage, operating entirely around digital information. There's also new funding behaviors. Someone mentioned crowdfunding earlier. Crowdfunding is an incredible phenomenon. As I said, I was in Beijing. They sort of flippantly mentioned a recent crowdfunding effort in which 582 million people participated. Are you kidding me? 582 million people? That's a lot of people. But the thing about crowdfunding is it's not always used for what we might think of as public benefit. Ripped from your own headlines, an example of crowdfunding used to create the first crowdfunded IVF baby. Now that's probably a wonderful thing for that particular family, but crowdfunding is a perfect place to look for dollars being used, and no one really knows. Are they philanthropic? Are they shopping? Are they investing? Are they just helping somebody out? What are they doing? We don't know. We really don't know. It's a digital environment in which the money is moving in extraordinary amounts, but the old lines of nonprofit investing, shopping, public paying, they're all very blurry in the digital environment. We're also entering an age when actually donating your data will become a phenomenon that we're going to need to understand. We've built a philanthropic and nonprofit sector about donating time and money. But do we really understand what it means to donate data, particularly your genetic information? Those are both health exchanges, opportunities to donate your DNA. Of course, we donate other data as well, and the United Nations is working on making sure that some data streams get openly accessed and can be used by anyone in an emergency. So we're going to start seeing things where the Twitter stream or the Facebook stream are seen as literally public goods in moments of regional or global catastrophe. We have no structures yet to donate our data. We need to invent them. And finally, when you use digital data, there's actually a new kind of public benefit being created. Let me give you an example to illustrate this point. You're probably familiar with crisis hotlines, assuming there's several in Australia, probably several here in just Melbourne. Somebody in crisis makes a phone call, gets help. There's sort of a one-to-one creation of public benefit in that relationship where the individual in crisis gets help. Nowadays, that's happening by text message, because I don't know if you've seen a teenager lately, but they don't ever do this, right? They do this. So there's an organization called Crisis Text Line that's helping crisis counseling centers around the US and Canada convert their systems from this to this. And the interesting thing in going from this to this is that when you text message, it leaves a trail. And when you interact with whoever it is on the other side of that text message, you capture that trail. And so what's happening is Crisis Text Line is not only producing the public benefit of the one-to-one interaction, but they're producing this ancillary data set, an additional data set of what people are texting about. What are the crises? Do they vary by time? Do they vary by day? Do they vary by region, gender, age? It is a remarkable resource of public benefit for policymakers and researchers. And if you think about every time you take the practices of your organization and digitize them, you'll realize that you too are creating that kind of additional data set. And how to reap public benefit from that data set while protecting the privacy and rights of the people who are represented in it is our collective challenge in digital civil society. Here's some, as I've introduced, I gave you a couple examples of some of what's new. Here's just some of what we don't know. Trust me, if I were to give you a long list of all the things I don't know, we'd be here for weeks. But this is some of it. We don't know who owns what in the digital environment. It's really not entirely clear who owns which data sets. That's a problem, because we're a sector built on giving things. And we're going to need to adapt to a world in which you can give something and still own it. You can give something and still have it. We need to figure out what that's going to look like. We also do all of this, I think I missed some slides here. We also do all of this on systems that are owned by telecommunication companies, internet companies, and governments. We're no longer meeting in relatively private places to have a conversation about the change we want to make happen. We're doing it in digital environments where it's all traceable, trackable, and storable. Civil society is built on the assumption that we can, in fact, make these choices in private and without being listened to. So we need to create a digital environment in which that's actually the truth. And then there are a lot of decisions to be made, and the work that Brad talked about with the reporting commitment, some of the other big data efforts, this is the hard work that gets done in those, are these pure governance decisions about what are you going to collect? What are you going to hold on to? When are you going to destroy it? And my cry to civil society is to recognize that we need to make those decisions from our core values about why we exist in democracies, and that we need to communicate those decisions honestly and with integrity. And that how we manage that digital data may very well be what comes to define us going forward, what distinguishes us from government action and what distinguishes us from corporate action. We need all three. But civil society needs to make these decisions honestly and with integrity if the trust between us and our communities is going to continue in the digital age. So here's a couple more examples of who owns what. The Code for Australia example, which I mentioned, it's really not clear. When a nonprofit takes public data and creates new systems to improve bike sharing or parking or public works operations, who owns what they've created? Is it public? Is it nonprofit? Who owns this stuff? I talked about donating your digital data. David Hockney, an artist, among others, has started creating art on his iPad. Now, wait a second. There's a fabulous interview with the artist on the Telegraph website from the UK where he talks about, I just started drawing on my iPad and sending them off to friends. His gallerist and his manager must have freaked out at that point. There's Hockney sending his artwork around the globe. Well, that's beautiful and wonderful. There's more Hockney for everybody. But there goes the art market. How do you donate it? Here's the third-party relationships I'm talking about. All of this stuff being managed by new players, real entrants into civil society when we take into account the organizations that actually manage the telecommunications system, that manage the wires, and that manage the way we interact and send all of this information. This is the how do we govern data. I live in San Francisco and was up in Sonoma County 10 days ago when the earthquake hit Napa. Everything in my house was fine. The next day I went online and Beth Cantor, who many of you may know, who's really a social media guru, was tweeting about how Fitbit, the company that makes those things that you put on your wrists, that monitor how well you sleep as well as how many steps you take, had published how many people woke up during the earthquake. Really? They had the data, live streamed to them when everybody woke up, 3:20 a.m. Why not share it? Well, I can think of a lot of reasons to not share it. So how do we manage this stuff? I find this all so incredibly weird, that's the technical term, that I have to use a metaphor to try to understand it. So let me try this out on you. It may work, it may just confuse you further, in which case I apologize. All of the systems we've built, that you've built here in Australia, that I've been part of in the US, that we built collectively around the globe as civil society institutions, not-for-profit organizations, foundations, social businesses, social enterprises, impact investing, all of the structures of that were built for land. They were built to use resources that we understood. I have it, you don't. I give it to you, I don't have it anymore. That was the assumption. The analogy I use is those rules and those assumptions and those institutions are as if we were standing on land. And digital data, with all of that long list of characteristics and all of the weird ways it can be saved and stored and shared and remixed and sent around, that's all, again, the technical terms. I hope you got that done. Okay. Is much more like water. And where those two things meet, water and land, as you well know, living here in the beautiful city of Melbourne, it's a beautiful thing, that coastline. It can also be incredibly treacherous. We need both, but we need to figure out how to really survive and flourish in the digital version of this. Instead, this is where we are. We've taken our analog institutions and we've put them on pontoons and we've set them out to sea. Or in this case, out on a lake. And I wouldn't recommend taking it out of that lake and sending it off in any kind of more treacherous waters. We really need to create whole new institutions. And again, we are all doing that. That is a global effort. It's not going to be led by the US. We're going to do it collectively. Here's part of what I think will be part of that invention, some of the things we need to invent next. We really need to think about a spectrum of rights about digital data. We need to think about how we're going to respect the donors of that data, who are no longer just the donors that we're used to dealing with. It's not just the financial donors. It's actually everyone who interacts with our organization, everyone who uses our website, everyone who benefits from our programs is probably a data donor. We need those new forms of governance. We need to create new houseboats, if you will, hopefully slightly more agile and more built to the waterways we'll be sailing them on. And we really need to understand and create and invent new ways to donate digital goods, to finance them, and to preserve them. We don't know how to do these things. We're all going to learn together. At Stanford, at the Digital Civil Society Lab, that I'm excited to be a part of it, part of the center, here's some of what we're working on, and very happy to engage and share this with you, because in the digital world, I can do this in Stanford, California, and make it available to you instantly. We're hosting a conference in a few weeks on the ethics of using data in civil society, and we'll be happy to share that information. We're creating a primer for funders to then give them a set of questions to think about. It'll also be available for nonprofits, of course, about how do you think about the data that your organization is collecting and using and storing and sharing and destroying in ways that advance your mission and don't, in fact, subvert the work you're trying to do. And we'll be creating a set of policy templates to cover all of the data decisions that are now a fundamental part of running any organization, but particularly civil society organizations, where we need to step up and make sure that we're using these tools in ways that advance our missions, that protect people's privacy, that allow us to associate freely, that extend our right to expression, and enable us to continue to freely choose to donate our private resources for public benefit in the digital age. Thank you very much.